Alexander Solzhenitsyn said that when he was being marched off to the gulags by the Soviet Union police, he was condemning them and cursing them in his head silently. I can't believe these fucking assholes. Fuck them. What are they doing? They're so evil and corrupt. But then he remembered about a year and a half ago, he was so patriotic and he loved the Soviet Union and he wanted to be one of the officers, but his love for writing prevented him from applying. So he thought, like, I'm a hypocrite. Like, how dare I say that? I could have easily been these guys walking somebody like me off to the gulag, but instead, because I chose a different route, the roles are reversed. I can't sit here and condemn them. The line between good and evil is razor thin, and it slices between every human being. Like, it's not fair to call those people inherently evil.
No. Yeah, that's completely right. I don't think anybody's evil. I don't think anybody wants people to die. I don't think anybody wants people to deal with the suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety, whatever it is that this lockdown is basically pressing on people. The difference is with the method of their protest. Right? What I have a problem with is put mask on. It's like, well, you're barking at the wrong tree, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And yeah, with just the method of that people use, and obviously I am pro-vaccine. I've been very clear about that. I think vaccination should be a lot faster and a lot more, and then we're gonna survive. I think we're gonna survive this altogether.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's switch gears here for a bit. Let's talk about your book.
Yeah, for sure.
I love your book. And do you think that the anecdote of Solzhenitsyn and the gulags kind of applies to what you talk about, or?
It was a little bit different because when those things happened to me, I could clearly see, and I mentioned this in my book too, that we were all coming from the same faith, mm-hmm. right? We all had the same faith. We just have different interpretation of it. And no, I don't think I could ever be in that position, but it might be because of my upbringing, of my family. Mm-hmm. My dad was a political activist for many, many years. And I always had a good understanding of what's going on because I was also really westernized and I was not really isolated. I had families who lived in Europe, and I understood. I had a little bit of global awareness, so it was really hard to be brainwashed into thinking that there's only one true form of justice. Everybody else is evil, and we're the godsend, gifts for people, but we're also killing people. So it was very for me, it was very obvious.
Yeah.
That I could never be part of that. I never romanticized being on the side of a government that is responsible for mass murder of many, many people.
Mm-hmm. So do you want to give some backstory? Because I've been reading your book and I've seen the promo and stuff. So do you want to give a bit of backstory to people who are unfamiliar with your book as to what you talk about, what you kind of deal with, and so on?
Yeah. So basically, the book takes place in 2009, about 11, 12 years ago, when after an election, some people believed that there was the election was rigged and the election was doctored, and those people wanted to protest the results of the election. We had a leader that he was the one who we thought should have been elected the president. And I mean, obviously we had some justified reasons for it. I'm not going to get into it. There's a massive amount of overwhelming data on that. But what we were saying was we need to protest these results and we need to do a recount or do something to get our votes back. And the protest started as a very, very peaceful protest because the leader, the guy who had to be president or who should have been president.
And where was this? Do you mind saying or no?
In Iran.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
What do you mean? Like where as in like what
Yeah, just
city?
because yeah, I meant just the country in general.
Yeah, it was in Iran. It was
Okay.
all over the country. I mean, the
Mhm.
guy was active in Tehran, which is the capital, but the protest was happening all over, right? Many millions of people were on the streets peacefully protesting, and then after just a few days, not even 2 or 3 days, the government started pushing back with high level of aggression,
Mhm.
and military came into the place, and they started beating people up. They started locking people. They acted guilty, if I, if I can say.
And this is the new
Uh,
regime that was elected in.
the regime stays the same. The regime is basically the supreme leader or whoever is on top, and then the president is the person who gets
Mm.
elected every 4 years, right?
Okay, okay.
So the regime still stays the same, but we, um, I mean, I'm not gonna say we. I believe that the reformation needs to happen inside the regime
Mhm.
in order for it to be meaningful. Um, and I am against any type of revolution because I think it's just counterproductive. It's going to leave the country open to a lot of problems. We have ISIS on the left, we have Al Qaeda on the right. It's not going to be good to not have a centralized government.
Mhm.
So the revolution, I don't think is the answer. That's why we were going for the reformation inside the government.
Mhm.
But yeah, the regime stays the same. The president changes, and that
Mhm.
was the election that we were protesting. And the government's response was the elected government's response was basically what set everything on fire for 2 years, 3 years in a row. They immediately brought the military into the picture, and just brutal, horrifying scenes of people falling like flies, military lining up on rooftops, killing people, police cars running people over in the crowd, and just the country immediately turned into a war zone. And
Mhm.
obviously, people, when they saw these things, when they saw their people, their friends, their families are dying, were getting imprisoned, they pushed back, and that's how the entire um, green movement started.
Mhm.
We called it green movement because the president who we think should have been elected chose that color as his basically color of election. So everybody
Mhm.
who supported him was trying to wear a green wristband, green shirt, green scarf, something to
Mhm.
show his support. That his color was green,
Mhm.
and that's why we call it a green movement.
Mhm. And so
And that
when
entire
yeah, and so when things started getting out of hand from the government's reaction, people were thrown in jail, uh, people were hurt, people were killed. Like, what was the kind of how long did that last, and what was kind of your reaction
it.
from it?
Um, well, I was not inside. I was not really in it at first. I was because I was not in capital. I was living in a different city,
Mhm.
in a very, very conservative city. So we didn't really have that much of a protest going on. But I would see them getting broadcast, and there are some horrifying footage of people just dying and bleeding out on the streets, and some people actually got famous. And I think Christa Berg, he made a song about one of our martyrs too. Um, I'll show you. I'll send you the
Mhm.
song
Yeah.
after. But yeah. So all these things was very emotional, very emotional for us because after like the entire campaign, entire election, we all thought everything is going to get better, right?
Mhm.
Everything was like, oh, there's going to be hope. Like we're going to get better. Everything is going to be okay after the election, and the overwhelming support everywhere you would look, it was green. Everybody was supporting this guy
Mhm.
in the streets, everywhere, right? On social media. I mean, the social media wasn't really that heavy back then, but
Yeah.
on Facebook, you could see just an overwhelming amount of green colors everywhere on the streets. And
Mhm.
when all those things came down, um, it was just we were just left with anger. We were just left with anger and disappointment. And yeah, it's exactly like just all your hopes and dreams are getting shattered, right?
Mhm.
So the response was, well, in my opinion, was inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as we started peacefully protesting, then more killings happened. So the emotion, it was a very emotional time for everybody. And I was obviously very emotional, and I was 15, didn't know what the fuck is going on, for the most part, but I was just in that stream of emotions, and I wanted to do whatever I could, right? And that's how I got into protesting in a way that I know, which is writing. You know, I was good at it. And I had a lot of good friends who introduced me to the publishers, to the good publishers that were also on the same side as us. So that's how I got into it. And that's how they got me. So,
so when they got you, did you think that it was going to happen for you, or it was going to happen to you, that you're like, there's no way that I could be in custody for this. There's no way that I could get caught.
I didn't think we were doing significant enough to be targeted. I didn't think our job was that important. Like there were a lot bigger people that were, that were protesting as well, and they were saying like worse thing about the government. So I didn't think we were targeted, but I was obviously wrong, and I don't know why this happened, because even right now I look back and I was like, yeah, there was a lot of worse shit happening. But I think it was because we didn't have any backing. We weren't that big of a resistance group. So they targeted us, and it was very easy for them to do so. So yeah, I didn't even believe it at first. It was everything was just happening very fast, and I was not afraid. I was not afraid for a very long time, and that was my mistake. That was my mistake. And people who were older than me, they were a little bit more aware. But again, I was 18, and the people who I was hanging out with, they were like all 18, 19. They were all university students. They were all established publishers, established authors, and very smart people. So they knew what was going on. I was mostly just following and wanting to be like them, right? I looked up to them, and I wanted to be them. So that's why I was doing these things, and I never thought about the backlash. But they had to give me a reality check. A few times we had some heart-to-hearts, and they're like, "Hey, like this. You sure you want to do this?" And I'm like, "Let's go."
Yeah, this isn't a game.
Yeah. They knew exactly what was going on. The guy who introduced me to this entire situation to this day, he still feels guilty. But I mean, at the end of the day, it was my decision, right?
Yeah, exactly. You signed up for it, and then
I take it to the chin, take the L, move on. It's one of those things.
Yeah, but it's something that you learn from, right? I mean, like, I don't know. I can't imagine being in prison, especially in Iran, whatever that looks like. But from what I read, it's not a good situation to be
not
arrested.
A walk in the park, no?
Yeah, it's not it's not exactly a slap on the wrist. When you were first taken away, I know they handcuffed you, they blindfolded you, and I remember you saying that anytime you tried to speak or anytime you tried to express emotion, they would shut you up or harass you in some kind of way. Do you want to kind of walk through the process of getting arrested, what that the details of how hard that was emotionally and all that shit?
Yeah, well, again, keep in mind that just wanted to put a note out there. This book is a lot of the things that happens, like a lot of the conversations are all just me freestyling 10 years after, because when you're in that situation, I don't know how the conversation went. I know like the concept of it. I know what was said, but I don't know what actually was the words, right? So, and I spent a long time trying to forget about it, right? Before I started writing the book. So when I tried to remember it, I had to bring back all those memories, and a lot of them weren't there. And I had to make stuff up for a storytelling purpose, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So the first few days, could not tell you what was happening. But then I had some time to sit down and actually reflect on what was happening, then yes, I noticed those things. I noticed those things. I noticed the suffocation. That their entire purpose was to break your soul, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one way to do that is to just not let you have anything, uh, including emotions. So they treat you like shit, and then when you get frustrated, you get beat up. When you get angry, you get beat up. Everybody's instructed not to talk to you. And imagine being somewhere you can't talk to anybody and you don't see the daylight. And you can't even yell when you're alone in a cell because someone's going to come in and someone's going to beat you. So yeah, just everything was suffocated.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to explain, but you just start finding other coping mechanisms, right? Just try to make up some people in your mind just to keep you company. And yeah, that was it. It's really hard to explain how that feeling is because you're not even sure if it's real.
Yeah.
You know, your
It's not
concept of
exactly something you can compare it to. Like,
no, yeah,
do you
exactly. It's
remember
like
when your parents locked you up and then beat the shit out of you? Huh. Some people are like, no, I don't.
yeah, like 10 times worse, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like it's one of those things that your concept of reality changes when you're in isolation,
Mm-hmm.
especially for that extended amount of time. And you just don't understand the difference between dream and reality. So it's like I'm going to give you an example. When I was there, everything's the same, right? Everything's the same. You don't know if it's morning, you don't know if it's lunchtime, breakfast, nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the meals are the same. There's no daylight. There's an artificial light on the floor, on the ceiling. Sorry, and your dreams start to melt into reality,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes any sense. So I would fall asleep and I would dream that I was in the room. I was in the same room, right, with the exact same structure and everything that was in it. And then I would wake up and I was still in the room. And then you repeat this process 5 or 6 times, and then you don't know when you're waking up. You don't know when you're
Yeah.
right. So the things that are happening, you can't tell. You don't know what's happening, right?
Mm-hmm. That's fucking wild. Holy shit. So
It's just something that it's really hard to write it, especially that's why it took me so long to try to write. Because
mm-hmm.
like, how can you write these emotions? How can
Yeah.
you know?
It's so what it sounds like to me is just like an extended period of numbness.
Yeah,
Like,
and you're numb to it because you can't even feel anything. You can't
yeah,
express emotions, and
yeah.
just everything is.
I went to sleep. I woke up. I have no idea what time of day it is. I have
I
no
don't
idea
know
how
what's
long I
happening. Yeah,
slept. I can't talk to
yeah,
people. I'm eating the same shit every day. I don't know
yeah.
even know what my thoughts would be. Like, man, I remember because when I was in Toronto, I'm going back in July 18th.
Nice.
There were some days where I realized I'm like, I haven't left my apartment today, and it was like 5 p.m. and I'm like, I'm gonna go nuts. And that's me
Yeah.
sitting in a fucking apartment in downtown Toronto with a TV, Wi-Fi,
Mm-hmm.
with a
Yeah.
bedroom. I'm still employed. I can call up my friend and talk to them immediately. They'd pick up.
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
them would at least. But it's like, and I'm going fucking ape shit like crazy. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, the idea that
The process of writing it was also a little bit traumatic. It brought back a lot of bad memories because I started writing it when COVID first happened, and
Mhm,
I took those regulations very seriously.
mhm,
At first, for the
yeah,
first 3 or 4 months, I
yeah,
was just hiding in my basement in my own mini solitary, and
mhm,
I was just trying to remember about being in solitary. So it was not a good time trying to remember that.
yeah, yeah.
And then it was like immediately followed by all those Black Lives Matter protests, and I was
Mhm.
seeing all these images online of cops lining up, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna log out for a little bit.
Yeah, I think that makes you a bigot, but keep going.
Yeah, well, I apologize. I apologize about
Yeah. Well, are you using your privilege to?
not being hands-on with that protest. It brought back a lot of bad memories, and I was like, hey, you know what? I paid my dues. You guys take care of this.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I can't do this emotionally. I get that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's funny. But yeah, man, that's wild because I don't know. The idea of trying to get people to understand what that's like, and even not even understand what it's like, but just the concept of what that would entail. Like, I can't imagine just somebody coming in to kick the shit out of me if I yelled. Like, what the fuck's wrong with this person, man? Just your job is to go kick the shit out of people who are suffering, out
Yeah.
of people who want to
And
die.
in your mind, you believe that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, you're fully you can't have less than 100% buy-in and have that
No.
position. You can't be like 70%. Like, yeah, I should be doing this and
Yeah.
execute. You know what I mean?
No, 100%. Like people who are in that prison. I mean, we were the political section of Evan is a lot worse than the criminal section. Is a lot
Mm-hmm.
worse than the criminal section, and it's because of the guards. I mean, my jailmates, the people who were there, were like journalists, doctors, bloggers, all
Mm-hmm.
great, smart people, and the guards are what makes it absolutely horrible. And it's notorious. It's notorious for that. I think it's one of the most famous political prisons in the world. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
Probably the top 10. Yeah.
even if it's not top 10 by whatever metric, like I think you still kind of drive the point home.
Yeah, as a 15-year old who, by the Iranian law, is illegal to imprison a minor
Mhm.
by the Iranian law. But it just when you're there, you're there.
Yeah.
There's no law,
So
no regulation.
how long were you there for? How long were you in prison for?
3-4 months around.
Okay, damn. And how did you get out? Like, did they just realize this fucking kid?
Oh, you
Like,
have to read to get there. No, I'm joking. Um, um, the entire concept of basically imprisoning people who pushed back against the government was to break their soul and make sure that they're not going to do it again, right? And also get some publicity out of it to try to discredit the movement, right? So we were just an anchor for that publicity stunt.
Mhm.
To I had to say that I got paid to write that piece that got me in trouble.
Mhm.
And I don't know from who, I don't know from what, but I got paid to do it. That's what I had to say. And I tried to push back as far as I could. At some point, you just can't.
Mhm. There's
And that's
a
how I got out. Yeah.
there was a conversation I was having with my friend about and I mean this could go into, are human beings naturally evil, because stuff like this, like dictatorships and oppression, and that happens all the time. Like this isn't like,
Yeah.
oh, that was in the history books. Ever since today, our
Yeah.
hands are cleaned. Humans are good now. And it's not I think the world is perfectly as it should be, and as it is 150% of the time. It's not necessarily the world's a wonderful place or the world's a negative place. It just is. And however much negative you can find in the world, there's as much positive to offset it. That's just me, though. And this could go into human beings are naturally destructive of a conversation. But I guess I was having this conversation with somebody, and we're talking about when you're in political power and you're being paid off by somebody bigger than you or another entity or a foreign country, and you can make like 30 people in your life, they're set, they're good, they don't have to worry about shit. All you got to do is accept the money from somebody else and let them do whatever the fuck they want. Like, obviously that's not right. However, for a lot of people, that's very enticing. And it's like, yo, why wouldn't I just fucking bend the knee to whomever the fuck, let them do what they want, and take care of this tiny group of people, right? So I don't know what kind of incentives that the guards and the police in Iran were facing or were given, but I don't know. What do you think of that concept, like of being paid off and lobbying and stuff like that?
I think it's valid to a certain point. Also, yeah, I agree with you that the history of humankind is very bloody. It's absolutely horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And are human beings evil. I don't know. I think there's grounds for that. There's a lot of grounds for that. If we're not talking out of our ego, I think human beings are basically the worst thing that could have happened to this planet.
Yeah.
When I look at all the pain that we caused
Mhm.
over the past 5,000 years. But moving on, yes, I believe that when you see what's behind the curtain, 100% you have to be paid off. But for the smaller people in that whole regime, you have to realize that they come from very strong faith.
Mhm.
They've been trained ever since they were kids, right? They were
Mhm.
trained that this is the way it should be. This guy is from God. What he says is God's orders. And if God is giving you an order and you refuse, then, like, writing's on the wall on that one. And when you actually in your heart you believe that to be true, then you become become somebody that has no compassion, that has no critical
Mhm.
thinking, right? That cannot understand the right from wrong. Because if God tells me to do something, I'm gonna do it,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, those guards, I think in their minds, I mean, there were obviously some people who had skin in the game, who had
Mhm.
some benefits that they were taking advantage of. But I think most of the people who stood in front of this massive protest, in their hearts, they believe that that's the right thing to do.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the difference. That's the difference between paying somebody off and brainwashing them from a very, very young age.